All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to my panel, the case for VGM in orchestral programming. Before I get started, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Zach Nicely. I'm an orchestra conductor based in New York City, and I specialize in hybrid programming of video game music with standard orchestral canon. I'm originally from southwestern Virginia, which is where Country Roads is actually about. And that's also where I got my bachelor's in music education at James Madison University, with specializing in French horn. While I was there, I was also participating in the vocal studios, studying classically, and I was in all the choirs and opera, really kind of just got all the different music pieces while I was there, which I continued to do into my master's at Western Michigan, which was in French horn performance. And that's also where I started getting interested in conducting. The director of orchestras at the time, Bruce Uchimura, I noticed he didn't have any graduate students, so I just approached him one day. I was like, hey, I notice you don't have any graduate conducting students. Could I study with you for a semester? And he said, here's the score for Brahms' Tragic Overture. Bring it to my office in a week. We'll see what you got. And after that, I was conducting the student ensembles and studying with him for the rest of my time there, on tour and everything. So basically doing all of the conducting graduate student work just without paying for the credits in the paper. And while I was there, I got a signature distinction on my diploma in leadership for my capstone project that I called the Smash Experiment, where I got a small chamber orchestra together to perform an open rehearsal and concert of music from Super Smash Bros. Melee while audience members played the game in real time on a projector. And so around that time, I realized that I really wanted to conduct both the standard orchestral repertoire that I really love, as well as music from video games, because I really just fell in love with them equally. And in order to do that, because no orchestras actually do that, I realized, well, I'll start my own, I guess. So when I moved to New York and started freelancing there, I also started a career in arts administration to basically learn how the sausage gets made. I got to know how an orchestra operates to sort of make that vision come true. So I worked at the College-Led Opera Company, and then I moved to the Distinguished Concerts International, which is a concert production company that puts together these giant, 300-piece choir concerts in Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center. That was really awesome to be a part of that. And then I started on the marketing team at Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, which is where I really got the meat and potatoes of my orchestral administrative experience. I was not only working in the marketing department, but it was a small office, so the development people were across the room. The executive director was in the center. So I was really getting involved in all the little pieces. And then I served as the board secretary for a year as well. So I was at all the board meetings, all the committee meetings, and I really got a nice idea of exactly how these organizations run and what their priorities are. And it was at that time that I founded Press Start Orchestra in New York. All right, cool. So now that we're not strangers, I'll get into the core of the presentation here. And for the sake of this discussion, I just want to define the scope and the point here. I'm going to be focusing mainly on professional orchestras, but everything that I talk about can apply to community orchestras, pro and community concert bands, college, advanced, high school concert ensembles. So just keep that in mind. But just for the sake of concise presentation, I'm just going to be talking about professional orchestras. My vision for the future is you can walk down the street in New York past Carnegie Hall and you see a concert poster coming up where you have names like Mozart, Matsu, Montgomery, all on the same program, and it's totally normal. That's just what classical music scene is. That's what the orchestra scene is. It's kind of what all of my work is focusing towards. And so first I want to talk about the state of video game music concerts, because you're probably thinking like, Zach, orchestras are performing video game music. Yeah, they are. They have been for a couple decades now. But these productions are entirely these giant multimedia events. With a few exceptions nowadays, I'll note, like the Stardew Valley tour. Did anybody get to see one of those Stardew Valley orchestra concerts? Yeah? How was it? Oh. Uh-huh. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. I didn't expect to get so much insight on that. Excellent. Thank you so much. I'd love to talk more about that later. Actually, I have a bunch of questions. That's exciting. But yeah, as soon as I heard about that concert, I went online to look for tickets, and they were sold out everywhere. So super glad we had somebody who was actually able to see it. But from what I saw, and correct me if I'm what's your name? Claire, correct me if I'm wrong. But from what I saw in their marketing materials and pictures, it's those concerts are it's actually kind of a smaller chamber orchestra, a little more intimate, and didn't have any kind of gameplay footage. It was just the orchestra, right? Okay. Yeah. Sure. Okay. That's cute. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So that is an exception. I've also started seeing Eric Roth's Final Fantasy New World productions. Those are also kind of a smaller, more intimate setting, but for the most part, it's still these giant multimedia productions, and the issue is for most orchestras, they are logistically and financially inaccessible. They require a lot of capital and just the staff in order to put these things on. According to a study by the League of American Orchestras, they have an annual Orchestras at a Glance publication. There are approximately 2,200 professional, community, and youth orchestras in the United States right now. And so based on your experiences, probably most of those orchestras aren't playing those giant video game music concerts, right? But there's so many more orchestras besides the biggies Chicago, New York Philharmonic and whatnot that can actually put these on. But yeah. And another issue is that when orchestras started programming things like video games live and whatnot, in the early 2000s, they were really hoping that the people attending those concerts would then start attending their other concerts. So, people going to see Symphony of the Goddesses, that's their first time seeing the orchestra, then they would maybe pick up a ticket to their next Beethoven concert or something. But that ended up not happening. And this here is a quote from a study that the Wallace Foundation did on crossover programming and different audience building strategies. This was published last year, so it's pretty fresh observation. So that, again, the crossover that they were hoping for didn't happen. But when that special programming did attract the chosen target audience, some organizations kept the programming and revised their metric for success. Here, organizations came to value the programming for attracting new audiences, even if they did not attend other programs, and for diversifying the organization's artistic offerings. And the study later notes that while repeat ticket buyers were staying about the same for these orchestras, the one-time ticket buyers increased significantly. So instead of banking on these crossover programs pulling in and converting people to their other concerts, they've seen positive outcomes just catering to multiple audiences. That's just their season. Instead of one core thing, they have multiple series that cater to a lot of other people's interests. And so one of the first challenge that I want to talk about in getting orchestras to program video game music is around the idea of what is artistry and stigmas about that. For the most part, orchestras often view music that doesn't fit in their normal symphonic fare and is from other popular mediums like movies and musicals, kind of just categorize all of that as pops. And I personally hate that very much because what it really what it does is it's a divisive way of looking at the repertoire and really demonstrates a sort of contempt or lack of respect for the cultural significance that all of those genres have in the musical space. So, and I'm not saying, while I am advocating for hybrid programming of video game music, I'm not saying that orchestras should constantly program all of these things together all the time, willy-nilly. They definitely have to be conscious of what audience they're catering to with each of their programs. It's just pretty good practice in music business acumen. But they can at least not just dump all of these genres into a pops category. I prefer that, and I encourage them to speak about these different genres by their genre. So instead of just it's all pops, you talk about it's movie score music, musicals, video games. And I actually, some of my mentors that work with these orchestras have told me that there actually might not be much work to convince orchestras that programming video game music is a good idea. So like I said before, they want to diversify their audience portfolio, but I'm taking things a step further and encouraging them not just to have video game music only concerts, which are great, but to program it with their regular repertoire. And they don't have to add video game music to their traditional rep, but the other way around. I'm encouraging them to include some of the traditional rep on the video game music programs. And maybe after 5 or 10 years of this being done successfully, will I start to encourage them to incorporate the video game music with their standard repertoire and then other concepts. because video game music, it holds the artistic value and cultural cash worthy of concert performance. And another way to look at this repertoire is orchestras also struggle balancing tradition and innovation. And not only does this offer innovative programming potential with a dedicated audience to them, but much of the music branches off from some of the same traditions that they've cherished for years. If any of y'all went to Kermit's presentation yesterday on music from the Pokemon games, he made a really great case for that. There's a lot of excellent examples. I was like, well, I can probably just skip this next part of the presentation. but what I wanted to share is one of my favorite examples of this from an interview with a writer based in Kyoto, Akinori Sao. Anybody perhaps know what interview I'm about to bring up? How about now? Has anybody perhaps heard of this? Sometimes when I talk to people about this interview, they're like, "Oh man, yeah, that the copyright thing." But then some people are like, "It's brand new." But basically, what happened is there's this interview where Kanda-san and Miyamoto-san from Nintendo are talking about the release of the original Legend of Zelda game, and the music for the opening crawl was originally Ravel's Bolero. And in Japan, copyright expires 50 years after the composer passes away. And they were like, Ravel's pretty old, so we're probably good to go. It's fine. But then, at the last minute, in the last couple weeks before the game was to be produced and released, they decided to double check and found that it had been 49 years and 11 months since he passed away. And they were, and Tezuka-san was like, we can't delay this another month. You got to rewrite it. So Kanda-san pulled an all-nighter and rewrote the entire title music for the game by pulling elements from the music he'd written elsewhere. So naturally, if he's writing if the title music for the game is Ravel's Bolero, we could safely speculate that the music that he's writing in the rest of the game has significant influence from that piece, right? And then, of course, if he's rewriting it and pulling that influence back into creating this new title screen music, that grip that musical style has on those themes is absolutely going to stay there, and has pretty much influenced the entire Legend of Zelda series scores from, especially with the games of the first couple decades. Ravel's just baked in there. So, anyway, back to this whole concept. Something else that I want to point out about that Wallace Foundation study I mentioned on crossover programming, the practice of crossover programming they're referring to is a concert dedicated entirely to a separate genre. So something like a Beatles concert, Symphony of the Goddesses, VGM Live, and what I'm looking at that this picture represents here is programming this music alongside other standard symphonic and chamber repertoire. That just hasn't been done at all, at least not at a commercial level. And these folks, when I talk to them, it's a pretty foreign concept. It's kind of hard for them to wrap their heads around it. I know every time that I tell a conducting mentor is like, hey, I want to specialize in creating programs with video game music and standard orchestral repertoire. After about 10 or 15 minutes of the conversation, they say something like, okay, so if you want to do these all video game music concerts, they sort of slip into their default pops traditional mindset. So basically, this hasn't even really been thought about. So, how do you make a concert like that? How do you program video games? And that's what Press Start was created for in New York. So the programs for Press Start included both video game music and classical canon at the same time. And we only picked video game music from rights holders that we could actually get a hold of. So instead of the cover band or cover orchestra model that others use that kind of ride a blanket performance license like cover bands and of other genres do, we simulated what other professional orchestras would need to do to really understand where the gaps are in getting orchestras to play this music. And the way that we approached repertoire was with this composer competition, in which, and the first model of this, we gave entrants a list of pre-selected video game tracks to choose from, and then we gave them a list of old school composers like Mozart, Ravel, Shostakovich, whatnot, and they were challenged to write that selected video game track in the style of that old school composer. And the results were pretty wild. It was a very cool experiment. The second model, we abandoned the old school composer component, but we still asked entrants to apply their own compositional style into the writing. And again, we got permissions from the rights holders to pursue these extremely derivative products. And so Press Start's first season was comprised of these two concerts. First one, it went straight to the browser. I didn't have to drag it. Awesome. So this program, is almost entirely tracks from Hollow Knight, but is paired with Shostakovich's Piano Trio No. 2, and it was so cool. It was a very spooky program. I think Kermit actually talked about Shostakovich a little bit yesterday too, much more succinctly than I'm about to, and how a lot of his music is very dark and edgy, considering the sort of the Soviet environment that he was working in at the time, and the music from Hollow Knight has some pretty depressing lore backing it up, and it has a bit of an edgier quality, not quite as coarse as Shostakovich, but still it kind of has that sort of gravitas to it that really complemented each other well. It's very cool. And which way is the person going? And the other concert that we did was music from Journey, and we paired this with a couple of pieces. So we had Sandro Barber's Adagio for strings, and a piece by a composer out of Brooklyn, who, after programming this, we ended up becoming really good friends. I had the keys to his apartment on my key ring for when I go and cat sit for him. That's pretty cool. But before his native tongues with his concerto for beatbox, flute, and strings, and then some music from Carl Jacobs Palladio. This is really interesting. And again, this is extremely fun to put on. And at the end of each of these concerts, I had some friends who they didn't play video games at all, but they love going to classical music concerts and everything, and they would approach me afterwards and say, "I had no idea that music from video games sounds like this now." as well. So a lot of the bias kind of just comes from pure ignorance. Like people just have really old three-track chiptunes in their minds, which even again Kermit demonstrated has a whole lot of musical depth that can be in there. And I think the coolest thing that came out of this is that season is currently a finalist for the 2024 American Prize in Orchestral Programming in the professional division. So yeah, when I saw this, I absolutely lost my mind. So it's just like, wow, this is just a really great step forward in advocating for the artistic viability of programming video game music with other repertoire. And so we're at a music and gaming convention, and you've heard absolutely no music so far, just me blabbing on. So I want to share with you the winner of the first composer competition, which was an arrangement of Hornet from Christopher Larkin's score to Hollow Knight, arranged by John Matoba in the style of Stravinsky. He primarily uses a lot of the writing like Rite of Spring and some stuff and he quotes it a little bit, which is really, it was just really cool. But also the prize for the composer competition, like for the winner, was we would make one of those split screen music videos out of it. This was done like on the tail end of the pandemic, and so we were like, man, this piece is great. It's definitely the winner. Oh man, we picked the hardest piece to put together as the winner, so to make a music video out of it and perform it, but well worth the effort. Did any of y'all like during the COVID and whatnot put together any of those like split screen music videos, or like record yourself playing your instrument, sending it in, somebody like put it all together? Can we try that? Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And imagine trying to line up all of those tracks with all of the metric manipulation that Stravinsky used in his music. It was a challenge for sure. But I don't know. How did you get back? Anyway, I'm going to play you a little bit of the music video and then a little bit of the live performance of this to just show you the result of that. Also, I forgot to mention the instrumentation here is the same instrumentation that Stravinsky used for his composition Soldat, which is includes everything that you see here. Next, there. It's like a much faster live. Not pictured was the sweat constantly pouring down as I was keeping track of every single one of those meter changes. So one thing I want to add here is that so we started with a fully professional model, but the orchestra wasn't scaling at the rate that I was wanting it to. So this year we opened up membership to all New Yorkers for our first season as a community cover orchestra. There are gamer symphony orchestras, GSOs, popping up like all over the country right now. There are 3 of these orchestras in the DC Metro Baltimore area right now, and I'm pretty sure each of them are at like 100+ members and like growing. So guess how many of these orchestras are in New York City? Yeah. Well, now there's one. 0. Absolutely none for a much higher population density than the DC area. And the closest ensembles are in New Jersey and Norwalk, Connecticut. But you know, anybody who's lived in New York or knows any New Yorkers know that they don't leave the city. Like you might as well be asking them to commute to the Midwest. So I guess that there's probably a strong demand for this in New York, and it turns out I was right. The interest form had 40 submissions in 1 week, and is currently sitting at about 80+ since June. But I haven't abandoned the advocacy for Pro and other standing orchestras to perform video game music. Since it was so difficult gathering the resources to build a professional orchestra from scratch, I realized it's probably better to focus on orchestras that are already set up because, well, they have those resources. And so I want to go back to those challenges. One other thing that I did want to mention, however, about the composer competition content. Something that I want to be very careful of is not is not implying a need to improve video game music by like applying someone else's style on top of it. I think that it's sometimes when I'm talking to people, I will mention the composers that they're familiar with and their writing techniques and how they're similar to a lot of techniques used in video game music as a way to get them interested in it. I think it's a great advocacy, but I'm very careful to leave the point that video game music has a great artistic value on its own as it's written. So just wanted to put that out there. But anyway, challenge number 2: resources and licensing. So here's the thing. Even if orchestras like were and some of them are interested in programming this music and wanting to build relationships with this community, they can't. They don't have, and this is why. So the sheet music component, there's almost no professional or advanced sheet music available for ensembles to use, and also a lot of video game scores, like they're already very complex. I'm not saying that most of this music, like the sheet music, is kind of pared down to be more accessible for like school ensembles and whatnot, and educational tools, which is fantastic. I love seeing all of that content out there right now. But yeah, there's very little music that is you put down on sheet music to really honor the way that it was originally written, which would cater to a lot of more advanced ensembles. Yeah, and so some of these examples that I have here on the slide are on Alfred Music Publishing's website, and these are mostly ranked as like grade 2 or 3, which is I think national scale of difficulty that goes between 1 and 5, but I think 6 also happens sometimes. And so 2 to 3 is like is kind of like very intermediate, beginner intermediate level. I think the World of Warcraft, there's a World of Warcraft medley on there too that's actually more of a 4 or 5, but really that's it. And that's a whole other incentive to get orchestras to perform this music, aside from just like the artistic value that it has on its own. School ensembles often use VGM as a recruiting tool, but for those kids who first pick up their instrument to play music from their favorite game, what happens after they graduate? There's nothing for them. Granted, this rapid increase in GSOs that I mentioned earlier is solving that problem, but licensed sheet music for the advanced player is still a huge option. And that second bullet point, I can point to for a second. So this sheet music that is available, by the way, the performance licensing to actually perform it. Like when you purchase that sheet music, that doesn't come with the actual license to perform. That's a completely separate thing that you have to acquire. And the performance licensing that you can get for these is questionable, because if you look for the exact iteration of this music, there's the individual tracks from Halo 3 you could find in the ASCAP repertoire, but you're not going to find this specific themes from Halo 3 arrangement on the repertoire. So it's kind of ambiguous, and I've emailed them before and been so how do I get the performance licensing? They're just you can just check out ASCAP and make sure you have that license. Good to go. I'm like, okay. So even that sheet music there is like, if you were wanting to perform it commercially, I don't think actually you could do that. At least not confidently. Which is an excellent segue into the licensing portion. There is currently no infrastructure for licensing video game music for concert performance. I was really excited that I found this picture because this kind of illustrates the problem perfectly. It's not the medium for which video game music was intended. It wasn't written to be performed at concerts, And I mentioned earlier that cover bands performing covers under like a venue's blanket performance license. But the orchestra industry doesn't operate that way. Compositions are written for concert performance, and that's their final form. They're registered with PROs as a concert piece. Orchestras would need a license to arrange this music, which there is no compulsory option for. That requires a custom agreement with the rights holder, and nobody has time for that. Especially not in orchestras. I could tell you from working in the office, like they're too busy to be offered a difficult task. If we want them to perform video game music, it has to fit in the infrastructure that they're used to and they can access easily. And again, like some of my mentors have said, advocacy might actually not be a huge problem. But even if an orchestra is on board for this reason, they can't actually perform any of it. I feel like some folks who are maybe more familiar with the whole the legal environment here probably entered this panel thinking well, I can tell you exactly why they're not doing it. So it's almost like, what's the point of advocating for something they can't do? Well, we've arrived to how we're pulling all of this together, and that is a new sheet music publishing company that I'm starting called Press Start Publishing. JavaScript first website. Okay. So we're still working on putting together our first products that we can actually have orchestras rent and perform. But right now we at least have pages describing for both an ensemble, a concert band or an orchestra who's getting a little curious about all this, what this music has to offer and what working from us will provide. And we also have a page for game publishers to answer okay, why should I spend the time setting up a license with you guys? Which are a lot of great points that I think for the most part I've covered. And you'll see a couple of different service options that offer because again, video game music was not written to be performed in concert performance originally. The method, the gaps between getting this sheet music licensed to arrange and licensed to perform is going to be different for every single publisher, depending on how they have their IP management set up. So we kind of have a blanket sort of. There's some publishers that the royalty management actually we won't really need to do. We can just report performances to them that they can plug into their existing royalty management processes. The point is to make this as smooth and easy as possible for everyone involved. For orchestras, it's going to be just like renting Copeland's Appalachian Spring off Boozy and Hops. Just go to the website, rent it, set up, done. For publishers, we're going to plug into their royalty management systems and make it as effortless on their part as possible, because they're also stupid busy. And and a lot of the questions that I get first about this is about like the big publishers, like, so how are you getting a hold of Nintendo and Square Enix and whatever? It's like, not yet. I can't even get a hold of the big publishers. But as my network grows and I start building these relationships, meeting dozens of new industry players every year, eventually I'll find those golden contacts and have something set up. And right now our target clients are indie developers, composers, and from there we'll be able to build a portfolio to show larger and larger companies until we've gotten to those AAA publishers. They have everything, conquer the world. Yeah, and what's really exciting about that though is that the indie scene is bustling right now. There's so much magnificent music being written for video games in the indie space. So it's almost like the video game music concerts that are existing are from mostly the large AAA publishers, but there's the market of indie video game music is almost virtually untapped. I'm so excited to delve into that, and my hope is that we will also be able to help advance the recognition and careers of composers and developers that we work with on the web. So I'm going to address the elephant in the room, which is little QR codes that were on the chair. Those QR codes lead to a survey that will ask you about your inclination to attend video game music concerts in different types of presentation. Basically, I'm anticipating the big questions that I'm going to get from orchestras, especially around the preference for a visual element. When I say like, here, this music is beautiful, you can perform it on its own. You don't need to have like a giant multimedia production. People will come to hear the music. They'll be like, okay, prove it. One of their first questions is, will they even show up if it's not like this huge multimedia production? And so having hard data for them to look at, showing people's our inclination to attend these concerts like that is going to make the difference in convincing orchestras to program this music. Orchestras are the most risk-averse businesses you may ever see, and so the best thing to convince them to put a program on is hard data showing that there's an audience that will come. So I'm going to enter the Q&A portion of this presentation. But while people are asking questions, I would love you to take that time to fill out that survey if you can, because that data is really going to determine just how quickly we can get orchestras to perform this music that we love so much. So any questions? Claire?
Classical programming to be orchestrated where their format has been strategically trying to use around what their goal is to format music, versus especially a lot of modern supportive and fancy video games with looking to be the survey. Right? Sometimes it is fairly not so there. But as a film music, and I believe that you have about how of, you know, practical symphony that we're talking about might matter with user attention, especially when you consider the orchestral lyrics and orchestra, which tend to have something very far outside of their lyrics. In some cases, because they're trying to do the studio and everyone but also in some cases because they find orchestration outside of their structure to be helpful and bring a variety of things.
That's an awesome question. So, yeah, it's fun. I actually thought about having an entire section about like the challenges of adapting this music because you could probably do an entire 2-hour presentation on all of the challenges there. Something that we have to do to certain each video game track that we would adapt for concert performance has a different level of tweaking that it's going to need to be successfully performed by and with an orchestra's instrumentation and in that concert setting, right? So especially like how most video game tracks are built to be looped. There's not necessarily a great way to end those. But also there's nothing wrong with just like fading out, the piece either, as it will be looped. It's funny every time I say like this is a challenge. There's also a whole bunch of possibilities at the same time, So depending on how much these music needs to be adapted, that's going to be covered in a custom licensing agreement with the original publisher. That's why we have to have a custom one. But in terms of, right, I think maybe your question is more like artistically and pragmatically, how do you adapt scores from an electronic medium to fit into an orchestra's instrumentation. And that I actually I'm finding it kind of hard to answer because the possibilities are endless. I know that's kind of a cop-out, but that is at least in my work something that I'm conscious of in selecting pre-existing orchestrations as well as creating my own. Is keeping in mind what most orchestras will have in their arsenal and be the easiest for them to program. Both. So the thing is, like, while orchestras they have this traditional acoustic setup that most of their pieces use, they also are getting more experimental and incorporating electronic sounds and instruments. And so, from a perspective of like incorporating electric instruments with acoustic instruments, we're gonna have arrangements that do that for those who are interested in that. But for the most part, the arrangements will be written to. I guess the way you're putting it, are we adapting it to the orchestra, or are we adapting the orchestra to the game soundtrack? Most of the arrangements are going to be for the latter. Because we want to use, what the orchestra has to honor the spirit of the original video game track. So, for instance, like let's say, y'all familiar with Octopath Traveler? That score. So, let's see, the battle theme one. The orchestration for that is mostly like lower instruments, and so I've seen a lot of arrangements. There's online on like MuseScore and everything. Like when they arrange something like this for an orchestra, they utilize every single color that the orchestra has. They got all the flutes, all the piccolos, all the oboes, all the clarinets, and for the 2D sections, like the loudest sections, they're applying every single sound into them. My approach is different. So for something like one of the battle themes from Octopath Traveler, even though an orchestra has access to clarinets, flutes, piccolos, and whatnot, that arrangement wouldn't have flute or piccolo in it. I'd select the instruments that would most closely honor the source material. And even in an instance where in those like 2D sections, the like climactic moments, I wouldn't even apply all of the instruments that are in the score either, because in some instances, like sorry, I've just been listening to Octopath Traveler a lot lately. Like the main theme of Octopath Traveler uses quite a more robust set of instruments and colors. But the way that it ends is the end of the track is like just two lower octaves of a stinger, like just bug it up bump. And while there are a whole bunch of higher voices with flutes and oboes and whatnot that used in there, I would leave those out for those last two bars, because the way that piece ends, even though it's like I don't, you could argue where the climax is, right? But if that is the climax of it, the way that it's approached isn't everybody conclusion. It is everybody conclusion, but then restating it in that lower register. It's more of a pointed sort of ending. Is that sorry? Does that satisfy your question? You kind of got me excited. I talk a lot, but yeah. For to sort of sum that up, Press Start Publishing's arrangements are going to use the orchestra or band's tools to represent the spirit of the original source material, rather than the other way around. Any other quick questions? I can answer it in like 1 minute. Half a minute. Yeah. The question is there an issue with like the composer of video game music performing their music? Because there are plenty of concerts where Danny Elfman's doing his stuff, John Williams is doing concerts of his stuff, but you don't really see a lot of video game composers doing that. I might mispronounce her name, but Imar Noon. Sorry, Imar Noon. Thank you so much. She does perform some of her music from World of Warcraft and some other things, but that's just more of an anecdote. But but why we don't see that happening more often, it's different for every single publisher. And it and there are different trends as you get closer to like AAA companies and indie companies, where the AAA companies, they actually, for the most part, they will actually own the intellectual property rights for their music. So like, the music for Final Fantasy, for the most part, not all of it, is actually owned by Square Enix. So, the Uematsu couldn't just take any of that music and just do a concert on its own. You would have to get a permission of the company and do it through them. But then in the indie space, it's more of a case-by-case basis. Some companies, they allow the composer to maintain all of the rights to their music that they write. So that's why we don't see a whole lot of game composers touring their own music in their own concerts. And I think also like it's also because it's kind of the whole like different medium thing. Like they're also busy working on other video game music projects. Touring orchestra concerts is kind of a whole other gig. And John Williams is retired, and this is what he's doing with his retirement. So that kind of is at play too. Does that answer your question? Yeah, exactly, and that's why kind of have to establish a whole company dedicated to figuring that stuff out. Yeah. Anyway, that's my time. So thank you all for attending. If you'd like to talk more afterwards, meet me outside. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you can chat more outside. So One Piece is real. Thank you for coming.